but I'm not. No, today we are still in the middle of our Wholehearted Living series, and just give you a recap real quick of where we've been. We know that we're worth being loved. We know that courage, compassion, and connection are the tools that we use to help us live our lives with our whole heart. And we know that guilt, shame, and blame can get in the way of those things. So today what we're going to talk about is cultivating resilience. Cultivating resilience, or put another way, facing the hard stuff. Right? Facing the hard stuff. So cultivating a spirit of resilience. The reason why, this is basically sort of a wholehearted living daily practice. This is something you're going to encounter and have to work on building every single day. Because every single day something comes up that requires us to sort of make a choice. Are we going to face this, or are we going to step back from it? Every single day. So cultivating a resilient spirit. I'm going to do this in the framework of the story of the book of Ruth. So I don't have a specific scripture to read. So we're going to read the whole, no, I'm just kidding. We're not going to read the whole thing. It's 4 chapters. It's not very long. If you haven't read it, or you haven't read it in a while, you really should. It's the kind of story, it's the kind of scripture that only really makes sense if you know the whole thing. Right? There's no like sort of punchline, or pithy little scripture in it that you can pull out and say, oh, this is what this means. No, it's this one, you need to know the whole thing. So I'll give you sort of the flyover, there you go, of Ruth. So really this book should be called the Book of Naomi, because Naomi is sort of the main character. Everything surrounds Naomi, and Ruth and Boaz are sort of offshoots near the end. But so Naomi's husband, Elimelech, say that one real fast. Actually, I started saying that yesterday and started hearing the Lion Sleep song.
I heard it as soon as you said that.
Yeah, this is how it goes at my house, you guys. Sorry, Andrew. So Elimelech, there's a famine in Bethlehem in Judah. Elimelech takes Naomi to Moab, okay? And I can give you the history behind why that was probably, I won't say a bad idea, but at least there's history between Judah and Moab, and we don't have time for it today. But just say it was probably not an easy decision to go there. All right, so they go there. They have 2 sons, and they get married to Moabite women. One of them is Ruth, and one of them is unnamed. I believe one of them is unnamed. Ruth is the one that's important, and you'll see why in a while. But they get married, so then Elimelech dies, both the sons die. Right? That leaves Ruth and Naomi and her 2 daughters-in-law. Okay, so now there's still a famine in the land, and Naomi hears that the way the Bible puts it is that the Lord is showing favor to his people back in Judah by giving them food to eat. So she decides to go back, and she takes her daughters-in-law with her, or I should say more likely they decided to go with her because they also had nothing now, right? So they go back, and on the way, Ruth said, Naomi, see, this is why it should be called the Book of Naomi. Naomi says to them, she basically releases them. She said, you should go back to your families, go back to your own families and live new lives, get remarried, do all that stuff. And initially they're like, no, we don't want to do that. We want to stick with you. And then in one of the cooler passages in the book, Naomi goes on to say, I have nothing for you. I can't bear more children, and even if I could, would you wait around? No. It's kind of silly for you guys to stick with me. I have nothing to offer. And so one of them, the unnamed one, she leaves. She goes back to her family. But Ruth sticks around. Ruth is like, no, I'm gonna stick with you. You are my family. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. This is one of probably the most famous Ruth line. They wrote a song about it, the Song of Ruth, and it's based on that passage. So they go back, and Naomi learns, in the story it sounds like she learns that they are near somebody who is a close relative. They call it a kinsman redeemer or a redeemer in the book. And so she tells Ruth to go, she says basically go to where this guy's field is, his barley field, and go pick up the sort of the leftovers when the harvesters take what they need. Usually there's some left over, and there are other places. I think Deuteronomy and Leviticus talk about sort of ordinances of the time that the needy, the hungry were allowed to go and pick up sort of the leftovers of the harvest, right, with no penalty, and it was actually encouraged as a way to take care of your neighbor. So Naomi tells Ruth to do this. Find somebody who likes you and will let you follow them, basically is what she says. So Ruth goes, and lo and behold, she meets Boaz, right? So she meets Boaz, and Boaz takes a shine to her, kind of likes her, and gives her extra food, and she goes back. Naomi, being wise beyond her years, says, stick with that dude, because he is going to hook us up. I mean, that's a paraphrase, but it's basically what she says. So, and I will PG this down, she tells Ruth to go visit Boaz that evening, talk a little, and see what happens, right? So she goes, she does that, and Boaz basically falls for her and says, you know what, I want to take care of you, I want to be your redeemer. However, somebody else is closer to you than I am. Basically meaning that somebody was more closely related to Naomi and had sort of rights to her first. Now, I'm going to use that language because that was the culture of the time where basically if women didn't own property, women were almost property, and if a husband died, the land didn't go necessarily. It went to the woman only in so much as the next man that came along inherited all of that, right? And usually how that would work is it would end up in the new husband's name. Okay. That's what makes this story a little bit different. What Boaz is saying to Ruth, and basically through Naomi, is that I want to redeem you, which what he's saying is I want to take care of you and bring you into my family, but the family name, your family name, the bloodline name, will not go away. So Elimelech's family lineage will continue throughout his land holdings, that was a big deal because basically it meant that the husband was revoking any rights to that inheritance. And so if they had family, it wouldn't go to their kids when he died. That's a big deal. So that's what Boaz is saying. He's saying, however, somebody else has this claim before me. So we have to go to the elders and offer that to him. So that's what they do in the story. They offer it to him, and he initially says, yeah, I want that. He's like, yeah, I want the land. And he's like, wait, but you have Naomi and Ruth to take care of too. And he's like, oh, wait, nope, I'm out. So Boaz ends up marrying Ruth and redeeming Ruth and Naomi. And that is the story. And there's a little bit more to it, but that's basically it. They persevere in the face of just horrible odds. Famine in the land, no husbands, no anything. Yet in the end, we have a story of women who had resilience, women who went through, and in the end were taken care of. Or I should rather say they made sure that they took care of themselves. Right? This is one of those really interesting stories because it's not in the Bible because of the story of resilience. That is the story, but that whole story is the framework to get to. It's an explanation. It's a story that explains how we get to David, King David, because right at the end there's a little bit of genealogy that goes through, and it says, Ruth was the mother of so and so, who's the mother of so and so, and we get down to David. So this is an explanation, a story that explains how David came to be and his lineage. And it's just a really big deal that they made the story, they're telling the story of the mother in that time. And this book endures because in a very patriarchal religion, in a very man-dominated faith, are numerous stories of women who this wouldn't exist without them. Right? This wouldn't exist without them. So, Ruth and Naomi were resilient, but what makes up resilience? Well, in this story, what makes up resilience for them, how they persevere, is they're resourceful, they sought help, they believed they could manage and cope with their situation, and they had social support available to help them, and they were connected with others. Okay, these are sort of 5 hallmarks of resilience, and honestly, if you have those, you can persevere. Okay? Here's where we get into trouble. Here's where me, you, because that's great, we all want that, right? We all want that, and some of us do that. Some of us have this resilient spirit. Some of us can look in the face of, pain and misery or difficult times and just plow right through that, right? We take that head on and we go. But most of us, a lot of us don't do that. And all of us do one thing that I'm going to talk about later that it's sort of contrary to that. But our biggest struggle comes in hope. Okay? Hope is the underpinning of that whole story of Ruth. They had hope that Naomi first started with hope that she could affect change in her situation, right? And then she taught that to Ruth. Hope and powerlessness, though, are interconnected. You get one when you don't have the other. Hope is an important piece of wholehearted living because without it, you will just fall into kind of a spiral of powerlessness. Now, hope is not an emotion. Hope isn't something you feel. Okay? Hope is a cognitive process. It's a thinking. It's a way of thinking. Hope is a way of thinking. Now, hope can make you feel certain things. It can, because I've heard people say, I feel hopeful. Well, you really feel inspired, or you feel joyful, or you feel like you anticipate, right? That's hope makes you feel those things, but hope is the way of thinking that makes you feel those things. Because hope says, I can do something about this. Or that something can be done about this. That is hope. Hope is a way of thinking. And like every other way of thinking, hope is learned. Hope is learned. It is not just something you have. So when people say, oh, just have hope, you can't. You can't just have it. You have to learn it. Now the good thing is you learn it at any age. Right? So if you're sitting here and you're on the second half, you're good. You can still learn it. It's all good. Right? Hope is learned. Hope is learned. That, for me as a father, that's awesome to know that I can have a hand in helping my kids deal with reality in a positive way. I can teach them to have hope. Now, you can't teach what you don't have. Right? So if I don't have hope, or I've not yet learned hope, then I better, or else my kids are sunk. Right? They're going to be sunk. Now, hope is not an emotion, it's a way of thinking, it is learned. And tolerance for disappointment, determination, and a belief in yourself are at the heart of hope. I love that. Tolerance of disappointment. If you're like me, you probably have a very low threshold for disappointment. You probably have a very low threshold for disappointment. But having a tolerance for one, that means it comes and you deal with it. It doesn't mean that you're all happy about it, but you deal with it. You tolerate it. You bring it in and it doesn't destroy you. That's where determination comes in. These are at the heart of hope. And tolerance for disappointment is one of those things that's learned, but man, think about how you have to learn that. You only get to learn it by being disappointed. And the good news is that you will be. A lot. Probably by those who are closest to you. You will be disappointed. So you'll have a lot of chances to learn this. Hopelessness, though. So if you can learn hope, that means you can be without hope, and that's hopelessness. Hopelessness is dangerous. Hopelessness is dangerous because it leads to, as I said before, it leads to a sense of powerlessness. If you do not have hope that you can change things or that things can change, you will feel powerless in this life. You will be literally at the whims of everyone else, everything else, and your emotional state and your well-being will be in other people's hands. If you have no hope, you feel like you have no power. Now, I don't mean power as in like strength, strong, like we think of power, especially in our culture, as our ability to impose things on other people. That's strong, that's power. But I'm not talking about that kind of power. It is in there, but Martin Luther King says power is the ability to effect change. That's it. Martin Luther King, I love that quote. Power is the ability to effect change. Brene Brown says, powerlessness is dangerous because for most of us, the inability to effect change is a desperate feeling. We need resilience and hope and spirit. We need resilience and hope and spirit that can carry us through the doubt and fear. We need to believe that we can effect change if we want to live and love with our whole hearts. You may have hope, and you may feel powerful. You may feel like you can work through this stuff on most things. But nobody in here does this 100% of the time. And our culture is built on powerlessness and hopelessness. Advertising, I've said these before, our advertising industry is built on giving you a sense of inadequacy. And here's why. Because powerlessness leads to numbing or taking the edge off. It leads to behaviors that are their whole purpose is to numb the pain, numb the discomfort, or take the edge off of reality. Now, all of you, I bet all of you went to alcoholism, drug addiction. I'm pretty sure that's where everybody just went when I said something like that. However, most of us, all of us, not even going to say most, all of us engage in behaviors that help us take the edge off of vulnerability, pain, and discomfort. Some of them are alcohol and drugs, but some of us use food, sex, relationships, money, work, caretaking, gambling, staying busy, affairs, chaos, shopping, planning, perfectionism, constant change, and my favorite one, the internet. And then that's not even an exhaustive list. But that's a list that I bet hit almost all of us. We use those things as a way to numb, to take the edge off of reality, right? A lot of us sit down at the end of the night to relax and binge some Netflix. I'm in the 4th season of Supernatural right now. By the way, best season so far. But how many of us do that at the end of the night where we do something that's sort of just like, it's something to take away the chaos of the day? Now we need outlets, sure. But occasional outlets always lead to more. Now we could go down the road to addiction. Addiction is just described as chronically and compulsively numbing and taking the edge off of feelings. Now, some of us, or some addictions, I shouldn't say all addictions probably start for 2 reasons. One, because you either just want to take the edge off, or because it's fun. The activity itself is fun. And we like it, and then we just need more of it. But what both of those do is they cause us to put reality outside of our bubble. And it doesn't get rid of it. It doesn't get rid of it. It just keeps it there until the bubble goes away. So, in an effort to keep the bubble up, we do it again. And again. And again. Perfect example of this, my back. I had those epidural shots back in August, right? They didn't make the thing go away. They didn't make any of the problems go away. They just made it so they don't have to think about it nearly as much. Eventually, though, that's going to wear off. And I'm going to have to do what? I'm going to have to get more injections or eventually a surgery. Right? it doesn't make the problem go away. It just puts it at bay for a while. Here is the problem when we do numbing behaviors. We take the edge off, especially if we do this chronically. The problem is that when we numb here's a good way to put it. When we numb the darkness, we numb the light. Okay? I said this, I think, a couple messages ago. If you don't allow yourself to really feel the sharpness of the negative emotions, you're also numbing your ability to feel the sharpness of the joyous emotions. When you numb the bad things, you also numb the positive things. You can't selectively numb. Numb is total. Taking the edge off is total. It's not, you can't just say, well, I want to feel these good things, so I'm just going to feel these good things, and we can get rid of it. That's just not the way it works. That is not how life works. That is not how that's not how our emotions were built. Our emotions were built to feel, and when we choose not to feel some of them, we choose not to feel all of them. You can't cut them out. Now, the reason why I use Ruth for this, the book of Ruth, is because nowhere in that story does Naomi or Ruth they do not engage in any sort of numbing behaviors. And here's why I think that is. I believe the Jewish culture of that day especially was much more in tune with their own emotional state. That is why we have half the Psalms yelling at God. Because they were open enough with themselves and their spirituality and with their relationship with God to say, to just get right in there and say, no, this is wrong. Right? So they were just open enough with themselves to not need to numb. Because there was no question that Naomi was going to try and persevere in her mind. There just was no question. She was like, well, this is what you do. Life goes on. Life goes on. Right? We've heard that. We get it from a story like this. Life goes on. When we engage in numbing behaviors, in things that take the edge off, essentially what we're saying to life is, we're going to put you on pause for a minute. But most of us never unpause the button. And then you start something in your 20s or your 30s, and then you're 60 or 70, and you're still on pause, and you're still emotionally stunted, and your spirituality is stunted because you have not learned any kind of hope. You have not gained any kind of power. You have just given all the power to outside forces. You've given all the power to outside forces. Feelings of hopelessness, fear, blame, pain, discomfort, vulnerability, and disconnection sabotage resilience. The only experience that seems broad and fierce enough to combat a list like that is the belief that we're all in this together and that something greater than us has the capacity to bring love and compassion into our lives. That is Brene Brown again. That is spirituality. Connectedness of people knowing that we are in something better, something greater than ourselves. That is spirituality, and that's about connecting with God. Spirituality is about connecting with God. Naomi was connected with God. She was so connected with God that she knew that God was with her and that she could affect change in her life. She taught that to Ruth, who taught that to her kids. Who taught that to her kids, who taught that to their kids. We get down to David, and we all know some stories about David. David got what he got thanks to people like Naomi and Ruth. They were all connected with God. So if I want you to do anything with this today, I want you to connect more with God in whatever way that is. Some of us, that's being out on a boat fishing. Some of that's us playing with our kids, and seeing things like last night, like Emmett. Emmett stayed up later than the rest of them, and he was just the cutest thing, and he was around, he was just cooking, pretend food and feeding all of us, and it was just a moment where I just saw the divine in a little package. Right? I connected with God in a way that you just can't at other times. But whatever it is for you that helps you connect with God, do that more. We say, I don't have time to whatever it is. You don't have time not to. Because unlike what many of us think, we don't get to cram for the final. Right? I see that so often. Where like my grandma was real funny with this. Right? She wasn't a religious person. She was a super spiritual person, but she didn't go to church or anything. And she used to always give me these little nuggets of wisdom. And then like near the end, when she was getting sick and stuff, she started wanting to like read the Bible and different things like that. And I'm like, Grandma, what are you doing? She's like, I'm cramming for the final. She literally said it. I'm cramming for the final. Like, I don't think that's how it works. I mean, it might. I could be wrong. But I don't think so. So you have to do these things now. Carmen wants me to take him fishing. I gotta find time to do that. Right? Emmett wants to cook me some pretend food. I gotta do that. Right? I have to do that. If, my sister decides she wants to spend some real quality time, not the kind that's soul-sucking, remember we talked about that, but real quality, connective, energy-giving time, I have to find time to do that. Right? You have to, because you don't have time to waste. You don't have time to waste. And today, we celebrate that truth. And it's hard. Because on a day like today, All Saints Day, we celebrate, all right, we celebrate lives lived and people past. We celebrate lives lived and people past. It serves as a way to help us deal with these sharp emotions, the cutting pain of, a loved one being gone. But it also serves as a stark reminder that we are not here forever. We are not here forever. You do not have time to put it off, whatever it is. You're connecting with God. You're connecting with others. Living your life with your whole heart. You don't have time to wait for that. You got to do that now because you only get this once. You only get this once. So, if you take anything away from that message, in the face of pain, in the face of adversity, in the face of everything feeling like it's lost, keep moving forward. Keep moving forward. Don't isolate yourself. Don't drown yourself in alcohol. Don't waste your life watching Netflix for 12 hours a day. Gosh, that show is so good. I'm not going to lie, I want to. I feel it, I know. But don't do it. Because now, if you're lucky enough to be on your deathbed, if you're lucky enough to be there and you're thinking about it, you're not going to be like, I wish I had finished Supernatural. No, you're not going to do it. Well, I mean, I might. Because it's a really good show. But you know what I'm saying is true. Like, you hear this all the time. We say this all the time. Stuff like this, It's almost cliched at this point, but the reason why it gets said all the time is because it's so true and we don't listen. We just don't listen. We're going to do what we do. So I'm up here today to tell you what Naomi and Ruth told you all those years ago. That when things get tough, devise a plan and keep moving forward because you can and will get through it. Especially if you're deeply connected spiritually. Doesn't mean religiously. Yes, we have a religious structure to help us with our spirituality, but you need to be deeply connected spiritually. Learn hope from somebody who has it. And if you don't have anybody who's super hopeful in your life, get out. Go find someone who's super hopeful. Have them teach you what that's about. And you'll learn it's because they were resourceful. It's because they have people. It's because they have hope. Okay. Now, I'd apologize for going over today.